So I think you've got to experience on the football field being out of control, being angry, and have your emotions get the better of you so that you can learn how to deal with it when those emotions kind of surface next time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of the Youth Soccer Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about emotions. We're going to start with Mo Salah. Paul, have you been listening and watching what's happened this week with regards to Mo?
I've been watching with glee. I'm an Everton fan, so it's been great for me watching the blow up. Obviously, for Salah, he's been the king of Liverpool now for a number of years. So I think it's hard to find yourself suddenly on the bench in that situation when you've been the king almost running the show. And then suddenly you're not contributing and you're getting criticism from fans and from pundits. My mate Jamie Carragher being the main one that comes to mind. I think it's normal and understandable to be angry when you're not playing, right? Most of us have experienced that. The problem is you often end up saying or doing something that you regret later on because you're too emotional about it. And I think if you can control that emotion and control yourself, the best response I've always found to being on the bench is show your qualities and your worth and bounce back. Obviously, the coach makes that decision. And from a player's perspective, you can't win because the coach has got all the cards. They hold all the cards. They're the one in control. So if you respond in a negative way, it's never going to turn out well for you. And I've done it, so I know from experience. But I also think, lastly, when you pass judgment as an outsider, which all of us are doing, it's easy. But you really never know the ins and outs of the situation on the inside.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, he doesn't do many interviews, does he? So I think the last main one that he did was last year regarding the contract renewal. And he was, I think he was 31, 32 at the time, and Liverpool didn't want to offer him a long-term contract, and he was kind of putting pressure on them publicly. And that didn't go down too well, but he was obviously firing on all cylinders at that point, so he kind of held the cards as well. Some people did at the time accuse him of his legs might be on the way out. I'm not sure if I bought into that or not. And then obviously Trent went to Madrid, and that's obviously had an impact on his game as well, because Trent was obviously an excellent passer, and more often than not, Salah was an outlet for that. So, Phil, what do you think? What do you think about all this?
Oh, it's all a bit complicated, isn't it? And we don't really know. I don't really know what's really going on behind closed doors here. From the outside, we've seen this happen a lot though with players, haven't they? When they come to sort of the end of being legends at a club, it happened to Roy Keane a little bit at Manchester United, and I think it happened to Beckham as well. You'd know more about that, Ricky, wouldn't you? I know this is Man United, but then I've listened to Gerrard and he said it sort of happened to him with Brendan Rodgers, and I think it happened to Suarez a little bit. So there's these themes where I just don't think people know how to honor each other and honor the club and sort of lead with dignity. I don't know why it would have to end like this if it is ending. Does that make sense? It seems to me like Slot's under a lot of pressure, and maybe Salah's sensed that and thought, well, maybe he'll go before me and I can come out and sort of add to that and put a bit more fuel on the fire. And it seems like it's backfired a little bit, but at the same time, Salah might be thinking, well, anyway, I'm off to Saudi Arabia in January, so and even get double his money. I don't really know what's going on. Is it good for the game? I think it's good for the drama. People looking into it, the aspect of looking at the game like a soap opera. If people want to see it that way, for me, it's a little bit unnecessary, and I think there's a little bit of a lack of honor and dignity for both Liverpool, Arne Slot, and Salah here.
It's
and then
funny
other
you
people
say
get
that,
involved.
Phil. It's funny you say that it's a lack of dignity and honor, and I think that this relates well to, and I'm sure we've all experienced this. Not to take it off football, but relationships and how they end. It never really ends in a very amicable way, right? And you walk away and you go, oh, yeah, I'm going to honor and respect you. It often ends in chaos. And I think this is kind of what's happening here. And it's obviously up to Slot and the club and Salah to just take a step back and go, hang on a minute, let's just relax. Let's not do and say the wrong thing. Let's just make sure we sort it out in the best way we can for all of us. But again, that's easy to say from the outside. It's hard when you're in it.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, we're going to transition now into emotions as a subject. and how it's used in the game. So let's start from a player's point of view. Obviously, youth soccer, the sport itself, very competitive, high intensity. With that, there's going to be lots of emotions involved. So from a player's point of view, Paul, let's start with emotions being used in a positive way.
Emotions being used in a positive way. I suppose that's harnessing the energy of anger and all the other things that come with what's going on in a game, and making that make you play better. Just taking all that energy in and letting it out by, let's use a really simple example, running more. You're angry or you've got emotions coming up and you just say to yourself, do you know what? I'm just going to run more. I'm going to run more and have an impact on the game going forward and going back. I'm going to defend. I'm going to charge forward every time we go forward, and just harness those emotions as energy. So harnessing emotions as energy is a positive way of looking at it. That's the first example.
Yeah, interested that, Paul. Can I ask a question to Paul? Do you think the harnessing the energy, do you think there's a relationship between sort of positive energy? So say, for instance, you're experiencing joy out on the pitch. Do you think that's more like you can run better when you're feeling joy?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's a good question to ask, Phil. And I think the easiest way to answer is ask any player and yourself what it feels like when you're 5-0 up to go and chase after someone, or what it feels like when you're 5-0 down to go and chase after someone. When you're 5-0 up to chase someone down for over 80 meters, you feel like you're Usain Bolt. When you're 5-0 down to chase someone down over 80 meters, people won't know who this comedian is, but you feel like you're running like Peter Kay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, if you're 5-0 down and you are absolutely livid about the result, and say you've just come off the bench and you were dropped for it anyway, and all of a sudden you've got to run 80 yards to go and smash into someone to prove a point, there's an injection there as well, isn't there? It's like, it isn't black or white, is it? It's like negative emotions can come in, and you can get a real trigger for them.
Yeah, and when we're talking about emotions in the game and how they're used, whenever I used to play, the coach would always, when he was addressing the team, he would say, "Be calm, composed, etc., etc." The usual kind of blanket umbrella advice that we get. For me, it worked a little bit differently. I needed that little bit of anger, that little bit of grit. I don't know how you'd call it. And often for me, it was kind of looking back, it was kind of a bit of a fault, but it was just the way it was. I'd often need to get hit with a tackle before I woke up. Some players just start games like that. They're really aggressive. They're on the front foot. Me, I was slightly different. I needed that interaction with an opponent, and that then got me going. But on the flip side, when that anger or that frustration, or that you just get a bit too caught up with all your emotions, it can also have a negative impact. You guys just spoke then about when you're 5-0 up, what's it like running and chasing a ball down versus when you're 5-0 down. So let's talk about what happens when it just goes a bit too far, and you've got all of this emotion inside you. You're feeling angry, you're feeling frustrated, things are not going your way. What then happens?
Well, for young players to control their emotions, I think it's really difficult. We know this from having been young players, especially, let's say, high school age. A lot of the players we deal with high levels of testosterone, all that's kicking off. And so I think that's why we often see things get a bit crazy on the pitch, and lots of it at high school. And I think personally that you've got to lose control of your emotions, probably quite a few times, in order to learn how to control them. You need to know what it feels like when you lose control, so that you understand that end of the anger spectrum, if you like. And then you can better understand and regulate your emotions as you move forward. But the idea that you can just talk about it, or learn how to control your emotions, or learn how to deal with anything without actually experiencing what it feels like, I don't think it works like that. So I think you've got to experience on the football field being out of control, being angry, and have your emotions get the better of you, so that you can learn how to deal with it when those emotions kind of surface next time.
Yeah, it's a great point. You've got reference points. You've got one end of the spectrum. You've got the other end of the spectrum, and so we've seen it time and time again on when we played, and obviously when we've coached. Phil, have you got any examples of a player that was perhaps having a bit of a bad day, things are not going his way or her way, and it's just kind of overspilled and it's led to something such as bookings or red cards?
Yeah, I think we've all seen it a little bit with players. We've had a couple that have come through, and they just can't keep control of themselves, and they'll end up getting sent off maybe 1 in 3 games. And it's saying things to the ref, which I think is like probably the lowest one you can do. Like saying something to the ref and getting sent off is like, what a waste.
The most foolish one.
The most foolish,
Unnecessary one,
the
yeah.
most uncontrolled in
Mm.
my opinion, the most unstrategic way of using aggression, or like the ability, the feeling of losing control of your of your emotional state into a highly angry one, and then spewing it out on the ref in some kind of swearing. And I just think that's the most ridiculous. We've come across that a lot, and that for me, I've got very, very little time for. Very little time. It's like that to me. That's like not even football. That you.
So
need to
then,
go
before
down
you
and
go on,
stop.
Phil, you'll have no time for me when I was 10. I lost my head so much. Not only did I swear at the ref and got sent off, I threw a stone at him straight afterwards. So
Oh,
there you
really?
go.
Good
Yeah.
job we didn't have YouTube back then, Paul. Wasn't it? Huh?
Wouldn't have
Mm.
survived.
That would have what, millions of views now.
Yeah,
Player from Nuneaton throws stone at ref, 10 years old.
brilliant.
No, well, I think. Listen, I don't mind it happening once. I think we're all human. Twice, maybe, but we're talking about serial cases here. Some of them. So anyway, I'm digressing into that. So everyone loses. Everyone has the ability to lose their head, and even when you lose your head, you really got to channel where you put that loss of control. Because as you said, Paul, it can come in handy. I played great when I lost control. Sometimes I wouldn't take it out on the ref. I'd get frustrated and I'd put it into my running, my tackling, like wanted to win a ball in the box, either box, like I'd go a little bit, nuts, if I'm honest, and I think it was handy. My issue was I couldn't get it. I couldn't lose it enough. I couldn't lose myself enough in it. It happened more when I was playing with my friends or in a local game, when people, it was a lot more emotional for me. And then all of a sudden you'd go and play a team from the north, you didn't know them. I really struggle to lose it and lose myself. And I think sometimes it's very, very important to do that if you use it in the right way.
So in terms of youth players, then what advice can we give to them? I know I've had many conversations with. It is emotional. It's not quite emotional, this example, but the whole speed to composure aspect. When you've got a fast player, really, really good, he's able to smoke players, go past them, inside, outside, whatever. But then when he gets to the edge of the box or he's in the box trying to shoot, there's a lack of composure, and the shot that comes is he's still in speed mode, right? What advice can we give to players that perhaps do have issues with controlling their emotions? And have you got any specific examples like what I've just given there that you can just give a bit more detail on? Phil, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, well, thanks, mate. It's related to this finishing in the box and being like a speed freak and having the ability. Well, Paul and I and you have mentioned before about turning on and off these emotional states. These intensity. Like you're a speed freak and you're running like Mbappe and you're going at 18 to 20 miles an hour to get yourself in the box, and you're going past people, and all of a sudden you need to just slow everything down and put a calm finish in. I mean, that's something I think you need to go and investigate. When you're at training or even when you're practicing, it's like I'm going to dribble, I take the ball from the halfway line, sprint as fast as I can, and then all of a sudden I need to calm everything down and find that little bit of composure. And it's interesting because we're going to relate it. I'm going to relate this back to the emotional state of maybe they can't slow down because it's too exciting. They're too what's the word that they use? It's you can maybe help me, but I'll just say it because they're too hyped up. They're too There's a word for it that will make it come from me. But they're too. There's too much energy. There's too much. Like it's too exciting. It's like, oh my god, I'm just about to score an amazing goal. And it's like
They're cooking.
That can easily just change and come crashing down into a really embarrassing miss. And you've gone from being, on the verge of scoring something that might be on YouTube for a long time and go on your reel and everyone like congratulating you to a point where you look, it's almost embarrassing. And then you're feeling a lot of like a bit of shame around it, like very, very difficult emotions to deal with. And ones that you have to go and, in my opinion, you have to visualize a little bit before you go out there and say, when I get into these situations, I am going to be calm no matter what. If I mess up, when I'm calm, I'm okay with it. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find that breath. I'm going to try and find that bit of relaxation in my finish. Because I think we all know I've done some good finishing aggressively when I'm angry, but most of the time I've scored goals when I'm calm, when I'm just, everything's a little bit more, like, as we said, with composure. And I'm just going to say one more thing quickly. That's the whole story around my first touch. My first touch was abysmal. I used to have players I used to play with, they would take the mick out of me. So they would make fun of my first touch, call it a trampoline, or say I had the touch of someone who isn't very, very delicate, as we all know in the game. And all of a sudden I was playing in this one game and I had enough of it myself. I was like, this touch is dreadful. It's like, it's embarrassing me. And then I just said to myself, do you know what? I couldn't care less if I have a bad touch now. And all of a sudden the ball started sticking to me energetically. It was very, very strange. And my career took a little bit of a real turn after that, just from being, do you know what? There was a little bit of, I don't careness, it really helped. So it's not caring too much at times.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've gone a bit long-winded there, but
no, it's
no,
okay,
no,
Phil.
I think that was
great
I
point.
think that was a great answer. Yeah,
Great
and a
point.
good example of how the emotional part plays into finishing. I was and still am an exceptional finisher, so I'll talk about it. And you can't learn how to be calm when you're finishing without practicing all the time,
of course,
going at speed and having someone against you, and then finishing over and over and over and over again until you get to the point where, if you ask a top professional, what's it feel like when you're finishing? And Haaland would most likely say, doesn't feel like anything to me. It feels like in slow motion, and I know I'm not rushing to do anything. I'm just almost going in slow motion and stroking the ball past the goalkeeper. And that's kind of how it would, when I played as striker, that's what it felt like. You'd be flying past someone really quick, and it would almost go slow motion for half a second, and you'd just be stroking the ball past the keeper rather than taking that rash, I'm going to swing and try and smash it as hard as I can.
I think the new ages call that a flow state, don't they, Paul?
Flow state, Phil, that's exactly what it is. And if anyone could teach you how to get into it all the time and be in that flow state, they'd be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Well, practice helps.
Practice does help.
There's no better way than practice, obviously. How many, I would ask players, how many strikers, or even if you're not a striker, how many of you are practicing with your friends at the field time and time and time again? Because let's be honest, in a team practice, this is talked about a lot. In a team practice, trying to have a finishing practice with 16, 18 players is really, really difficult. You can't get the reps. It's just not possible. And so I think a lot of that finishing work, unless you're training every day and your coach can split you into groups and work on that, a lot of that finishing work needs to be done in your own time. And that's the value of pickup soccer. That's the value of playing pickup soccer or playing with your friends.
Great point, Paul. The final bit I'll add to this is, because I speak with my players a lot about this actually. And Phil, you mentioned the word breath when you were giving your example. For a player, just moving away from the finishing aspect for a second, for a player that's perhaps amped up, got too much energy, he's acting angry, he's frustrated, the team's losing it, etc., etc. My advice would always be to a player to take a breath. And then if you're still feeling the same, you take another breath. And you do so, whether it's a break, it's a goal kick, it's a throw in, whatever it is, just to kind of center yourself. And those little things, they do help. They do help just bring you back into the moment, and then you can get on with the game. So for any of the players looking for a really basic exercise or technique, whatever it is, just take a breath, because when we're in the game and you're in the middle of it all, you're not really thinking about breathing. You're not really thinking about anything like that. So if you're able to just snap out of it just for a quick second and just bring yourself back, it can really help. And that's how we'll finish on for players.
I'm glad you said that. Let me quickly say, and I think that's why it's important to have a good coach and good teammates around you. Because if they know and you all understand that situation, you've talked about it and discussed it beforehand, you see a player losing it and you all go, hey, hang on. And it just makes the player go, oh yeah, hang on, let me take a second. So you need people helping you.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so we've discussed players. What about parents? So parents on the sideline, we've spoke about this in previous episodes. But in terms of emotions, so parents on the sideline getting a bit nuts or nice and chill. Phil, why don't you take the chill one? What do you see the advantages are of parents on the sideline just taking the approach of, you know what, I'm just going to let my son or daughter play. I'm not going to get attached to the game. I'm not going to get attached to the outcome. I'm just looking at it. I'm enjoying watching him or her play with the teammates. Talk to me.
Yeah, interesting. I just want to say that there's two aspects of watching your child playing football or your player, and that to me is you can have them in a tryout where it's like today's the day, and it's very hard to keep that emotional state if they're not turning up, and be all chill and be like, right, this is all we've been working for, and you have that mindset. If you have that mindset, and then also there's another mindset. It's like, right, there's a scrimmage or there's another game or a friendly, and you can afford to be a lot more chilled in those, because in my opinion, this game is a big, huge, it's the longest marathon you can imagine. And what's going to happen in that game isn't necessarily a make or break to their career, but as some of the greats say, it's just another lesson to learn within that. And if you are a parent and you're chilled and you're relaxed and you're watching your player and trying to engage with their emotional state and understand what they're going through and realize, there's something to be learned here, you're on the right track to helping your player develop. Because if you do that over and over and over again over the course of a couple of seasons, a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4, and you keep adding to all those, those little trinkets of information that you can use to make make yourself better as a developer and a parent, and also help your player become better by learning that. There's nothing better, in my opinion. Now you just have to really check in with those days that are like, cry. I want to stay calm, but come on, come on. Like, today's the day. It might not be the day. It still might not be the day. It still might be the biggest learning lesson you can do, even in those moments.
Good points, Phil. We've all been there. We've all been there. So, Paul, talk to me a little bit about, it's a competitive game. Let's say it's a semi-final or a final, and it's a local derby. Parents are amped up just as much as the kids. Talk to me about what that looks like on the sideline, and what's your opinion on whether it's a positive or a negative for the game itself.
I personally think it's a positive and almost necessary. We talked about this in a previous episode. Without that emotion on the sideline and without that noise on the sideline and things getting a little bit carried away, what are we playing in? What are we playing? Are we just playing in this sterile atmosphere where it's kind of a recreational, have a bit of fun, get your cookies afterwards, and everyone talks on the sideline. The parents are on their phones or talking about what they're doing later that night or what hotel they're staying at. Not for me. That's not the game. And so I think it, again, like I said in a previous episode, it should be noisy on the sideline. There should be emotions, just like it should be noisy on the pitch for the players, and there should be emotions on the pitch for the players. And I think I don't know that any of us, we can't talk about it from a parent perspective, right? Because I assume watching your kid, when you're a parent, I assume watching your kid play is difficult. Watching them win and succeed, easy, rewarding emotionally, great. When it goes the other way, a lot of different emotions to deal with. I do think from a parent perspective, you have to try and let your kid on the field struggle a bit and think about how you can support them while also holding them accountable. You've got to hold them accountable. You can't just get to the end of the game and go, well, you didn't try hard enough, I'll just leave it alone. I know I wouldn't be able to do that as a parent. I would want to ask my son or daughter, explain to me why you weren't trying hard enough. What were you experiencing in that game? What were the emotions you were feeling? And explain to me why you didn't run enough and why it looked to me like you weren't trying hard enough. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you're learning together at that point when you're speaking to the kid and you're asking them questions, and they've then got to think about the answer, and it's like it's a two-way conversation where you're both learning. It's a great approach. So let me put this situation to you both. We're just going to move away from the youth game, and we're going to take it to the pro game for a second. One of the ways that you determine the good players and exceptional players is those that are able to navigate their emotions and navigate circumstances. So, for example, let's say we're talking about a Premier League game. We're at one of the main traditional stadiums in England. That there's 50 to 75,000 people on the sideline, all hyped up, all emotional. Yeah,
There's only one team that has 75,000, Ricky, and
yeah,
that's Man U.
a little subtle one there for you, Phil. Well done for picking it up. I wonder if the viewers will. So let's say it's United Liverpool, right? At Old Trafford, biggest game possibly in the world, right? The players have to deal with all of that emotion in the stadium. Now, it's not their emotion, it's other people's emotion, right? And we've seen it time and time again, whereby if the crowd is up, that can have a massive impact on the energy levels of a particular team. Likewise, it can have an impact, not necessarily a positive one, for the opposing team. So talk to me a little bit about that from a player's point of view. Now I'm going to bring it back to the youth. You've got your parent on the sideline. The parent is somehow become the main focal point, the main voice on the sideline, and he or she is just going nuts. As a player, how are you dealing with that? Paul, you start with this one.
Swearing, telling them to shut up, probably.
Which we've heard a few times, right?
Yeah,
We've heard that a few times. Yeah.
In that situation, you don't want a parent just standing there screaming at the kid, telling them what to do. I mean, look, nobody wants that. But at the same time, again, I just don't think you can have that sterile, quiet atmosphere on the sideline. And people say, "Oh, it's okay, just let the kids play, just leave them and let them play." What, with nothing on the sideline, with no sound, with nobody saying anything? Because then, what challenge are they getting then? All right, they're getting a bit of a challenge on the field, but if they want to go and play at any kind of football level, they're going to have to deal with the sideline stuff. I think if you don't have that stuff on the sideline, and let's go back to emotions again, if you're not experiencing extreme emotions on the field, I personally don't think you're competing hard enough. I'll take it away and away from that a little bit onto a slightly different subject. I don't think you're competing hard enough. And that's okay if you want to have a bit of fun and just count the little turf balls or pit the grass. But if you're a competitive person, you should be experiencing difficult emotions in games if you're competing hard, because if you're competing hard, that's what comes up, difficult emotions. Maybe I didn't answer your question well enough then, Ricky, about the sideline parent, but if it's just one parent standing screaming and shouting at a kid, pointless. No one wants that.
Of course, and there was no correct answer really. The point I'm trying to get across is parent or group of parents, let's say, that they're becoming the vocal, or an individual or a group. It doesn't really matter. How, as a player, specifically youth, I'm brought it back to youth now, because we've established that the pro players, they're able, that's why the pros, they're able to navigate those external situations, all of that emotion in the stadium. Not all of them, some of them, and some of them still crumble, but when they do crumble, then they've got a reference point, like we were saying earlier, and hopefully they learn from that. But I'm talking now youth, because we've seen some crazy sidelines, right? We've seen some crazy sidelines, and there is often a direct correlation to the performance of that parent's child and their behavior on the sideline. So I just wanted to give us some examples of how we've seen that, and maybe we're going to transition to the coach's emotions now. So maybe this is a good way to transition through to it. As a coach, Phil, what are you doing in that situation? You've got someone absolutely blabbering on the sideline, talking absolute nonsense. What are you doing? Because you can see what it's doing to the kid. Because remember, the kid, that's their parents, their main voice. Yeah. Let's say it's a dad, for example, watching his son. The dad, as we all know, is the main voice at that point. Yeah. So you're listening to him almost more so than you would the coach. And we've had examples of this. So to just share a little bit, Phil, on that, please.
Oh, it's a really difficult one. It's an important question. It's a complicated question, but it's a really difficult one because, like I said, like I agree with Paul. I think noise on the sideline is the best preparation for understanding what it's going to be like if you want to play at a higher level, because there's noise everywhere, and no noise sometimes is the worst noise, as Paul said. You know, like if you're at home and your fans are quiet. And I'm going to say fans and parents are very, you know, that there's going to be a fine line there, but it is a very fine line. And in the middle of that fine line is your emotional connection as a family member, which can take it to a place where it's like, you're not talking to a player anymore. You're talking to your son. And if it happens, if I'm in a game and I'm coaching a game and I can see that there's a parent being a little bit too overzealous in what they're saying to a specific, their son or their daughter, I feel obligated to say something. I'm not saying that you can't meet it with the same energy, in my opinion, but you could definitely just say like yeah. And I wouldn't even turn to that specific parent. I'd just say to all the parents. I'd just say, hey, just I don't know what I'd say at the time. It depends what you're getting saying, but I'd say, and I'd start it, hey.
You would say, hey, yeah.
I'd say, hey. I'd be like, that's not helping. That's not helping us. And then I just go back to what I'm doing. I like the noise, but the parents really have to check in, and they could easily say the same thing to me. Really have to check in with how much they're giving to their son or daughter, because it's a different emotional connection. It's not.
You're making Phil. You're making a great point here, and I think that will transition to coaches. But staying on parents for a second and talking about coaches at the same time. We just talked about what it's like if there's 75,000 people on your side being positive. I've only experienced it with like multiple thousands, but the same thing is true. You feel that energy. So let's then translate that down to a youth game of maybe 20, 30, 50 people on the sideline. That can still have a positive impact on the individuals and the collective team if that energy is positive and it's cheering and trying to push and drive the team forward. Not picking out a kid or really, really criticizing a kid or the group as a whole. If that's a positive energy coming from the sidelines and it's 30, 40, 50 people, in my opinion, that is going to drive the kids on to run more and tackle harder and try harder.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true of a coach. If the coach is on the sideline being very positive with the players, I just think it helps them to play better. And I've done this myself, where I've lost my head, screamed and shouted on the sideline, or had a go at one kid, and you look at them and just go, they've gone inside their shell. I haven't helped that kid in that moment. But again, the emotions of it, sometimes it's hard to control yourself.
Yeah. Well, moving on to coaches then, Paul, just I wanted to just discuss a little bit. You just gave an example of in-game. So well, I'll let you add a little bit more to that. So in terms of a coach, when he's navigating a game, he's set up his team. Talk to me about the different types of emotions that you go through as a coach in both positive, let's say, just winning scenarios or a good performance, and also those when maybe you're getting beat and or the performance isn't going well. Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's very hard, I think, to sometimes separate your emotions from the result. And that's the biggest problem, I think, from a coaching perspective. You can go into a game and think we've prepared in this way and that way, so we're ready. And it might be going well for 20, 25 minutes. And you're ticking the boxes going, yeah, we've done this, this, and this. It's great. We're really following the plan. Suddenly someone makes a small mistake. Kid on the other team smashes a worldie in the top bin. And your emotional energy then changes to, we're 1-0 down. Now we're chasing the game. And it might go another 20, 30 minutes. You haven't scored. And suddenly you're in the second half. You're 20 minutes away from the end of the game. and it's a game that you feel like you have to win, whether it's a cup game or an important league game, important obviously being relative. But then you're starting to get really frustrated and annoyed. And let's say you're playing against a team that you know you should be beating. Even worse then, because the players are getting a bit desperate. You're desperate on the sideline. The parents are desperate. And already in your mind, it's going through thinking, what if we lose this? Disaster. Everyone's going to be fuming afterwards. And so that just kind of builds and builds and exacerbates the problem. And it's a difficult challenge and one that all coaches have to learn to deal with. And I think you only learn to deal with it by experiencing it over and over and over again. And if you can go into a game as a coach and keep your own, I guess, your own thoughts really focused this is an example. We've worked on this and this week. We've been working on our reaction to losing possession and our ability to attack quickly when we win possession. And let's say you go into a game and keep only those two things in mind, and you talk to your team beforehand and say, those are the two things that I'm going to watch you and judge you on today. Those are the only two things. I'm not going to diverge from that at all and start talking about other stuff. And if at half time or during the game, I do talk about other stuff, I want one of you to look at me and go, hang on, coach. No. Oh, hang on. We're only talking about these things today. And that's a good way of keeping yourself really focused on a couple of important things that you've worked on and only judging the players on those two things, regardless of how the game goes. Now, it's easy me just saying it here. Let's say I try and do that and we're 1-0 down. I'll still get emotional.
Of course. But great points made nonetheless. And also, like the advice given to the players, right? When you're in that emotional state, you've got all this energy flying through. To compose yourself in that moment, you just have to just remind yourself just to take a second and go, right, okay, it's about them. I've prepared them as best as I can. Ultimately they're out there on the field doing it. I've only got so much that I can actually do from the sideline. So the kind of control element there you've only got a little bit, right, that you can do in a game. And so just checking in with yourself again, maybe taking a breath, maybe just whatever, and just taking that second and then getting back to it would probably be something that we would be advised for coaches as well. Would you agree?
Definitely. I've actually asked players in the past, and I still do it now. If you see me losing it on the sideline and I'm getting too emotional about the game, I want you to hold me accountable in the same way as I hold you accountable on the pitch. And one of you just say something. And it happened a few weeks ago. And I can't think what had happened in the game, but I started to get really annoyed on the sideline. One of the players just looked over and went, Paul, hey.
I remember. Yeah.
And it just reset me. And I was like, yeah. Calm
Cheers,
down,
mate.
Paul. Calm down, mate. And it just reset me. That was great.
Brilliant. Phil, what about emotions for a coach after a game? Because we obviously, this is our job. We're driving back. We've got a 2-hour car journey often. We've gone to a far out place.
Must be Bakersfield you're talking about.
Yeah. You're on your own. You've just won a game. You've just lost a game. Talk to me about the difference there.
What was the score?
Well, you've won one and you've lost one. Give me the two thought processes.
All right.
How are your emotions?
Well, after let's start with the tough one. After losing, I mean, my emotional. I have a little bit of shame, like a little bit of embarrassment after a loss. You know, like I have a certain standard, and I try to take as much responsibility for the result as possible. Like, I think the whole thing's a show, and I like on the sideline as a coach, I like to be a little bit of a showman. You know, for
You do.
the parents, or you know, I think it's important. I think the best coaches, like, you know, they don't make a scene, but they make it you know, like an event, you know. And I think it's, especially if you've traveled 2 hours through a game. So I check in with what was my emotional state while I was making the event, you know. And obviously we lost the game, so there's a little bit of embarrassment, and I've got to go and sift through, you know, what were the emotional, what was I feeling at the time? You know, was I calm enough for the players? So it's all very reflective work after a loss for me, you know, and doing my best to try not to blame anyone else but myself. But simultaneously, it's always good to give you two a call and moan about a few players.
I was about to say to you, when you started this answer, I was going to say, you've already called me by this point, Phil.
No, yeah. It's good to. You need some people. We're all human, so you need some people to sort of like offload a little bit of the. Carl, what was he doing today? And I've had enough of this. We've done our best.
Exactly. And my response would have been, I saw him in training last week. He's been like this for 2 weeks now. Let's get rid of him.
No, yeah. But I mean, the revolving door, I'm someone who's extracted myself out of the revolving door energy of football, because I think that's probably the biggest issue we've got. And we started this conversation talking about Mo Salah. You know, the guy's been a legend at the club. You know, he's turned up, an Egyptian who's turned up to be one of the best players at Liverpool that there's ever been, up with there with like Dalglish, you know, and Steven Gerrard. And all of a sudden, we're talking like half a season, and we're talking like this. It's a very much a revolving door type energy. If you're not doing you leave. If you're doing well, you come in. If you're not doing well, you come out. And I just think when you're going through loss, it's best to just be like, no, we're all in it together. You know, we're all in it together. And these players are probably doing their best. I need to figure out how to get the best out of them, which is, again, it's a reflective, it's not an emotion. It's a reflective state.
Phil, that's the word. And I think it's important for us to emphasize that and stay on it for a minute. And I won't talk too much because I've talked a lot. You and Ricky can. A reflective state. Being able to reflect as a coach, reflect as a player, and reflect as a parent. I often wonder, are other people reflecting, or do they just get to the end of the game and they travel home and just go, no, I'm getting on with my day. I don't even remember what happened in the game. Because I'm reflecting and battering myself about it if it hasn't gone well, and trying to figure out what I can do better next time. I'll leave you to talk about that.
Well, it's an awareness, isn't it, Ricky?
It's
a state
Phil.
of awareness.
Would you like to go a bit further with that, Phil, for a minute?
You can if you like. I know you like the awareness stuff. Yeah.
I feel as though I've been reeled in here on this one.
Yeah.
For me personally, I think the self-reflection. I do think about the game once I've left. I think about what happened. I think about the players who did what well, who didn't do so well. And most of the time, I just take a little mental note of the ones that haven't done so well, and I make a note in my head to speak to them at training. And I only get time to do it with one, maybe two players, because I feel as though if someone's really struggled, then they need a little bit of a talking to get them out of a little bit of a rut. Once I've done that, my first point of call is usually just to call Paul straight away, and we usually have a chat, and then we all do the little merry-go-round between the three of us, depending on, you know, who's playing where and at what time. And generally, those conversations are about the players. In terms of myself, I don't really reflect on myself in terms of how I've coached, because I do that all day, every day anyway. So whether it's I'm coaching or I'm at home, that the self-reflection things is a big thing for me. So it kind of just all molds into one for me. And I'd be lying if I said that the drive home's not different if I've won or lost. I'd be lying if I said that. 100%. But at the same time, I don't have to, because I know the bigger picture, and I know that sometimes I'll use that example that I gave on a previous episode where we travelled really far and we got beat 2-1 against top of the league. Last 4 minutes, we conceded the goal, but it was an amazing performance. And I knew at that point that team had turned a corner in terms of mentality. So it was easy for me to then I didn't care about the result because the bigger picture was obvious, right? Finals, semi-finals, tournament losses, blah, blah, blah. That's a little bit different. But yeah, I think self-reflection is the key word there for all of us in terms of the players, the game, and ourselves as well. So yeah, great point, boys.
Well, right. Sorry, Ricky, just before you go on to that, we don't want to we don't want to beat ourselves up too much. I think the reflective state is a very healing state. If you can reflect well enough, you can find something in your reflection that's like, oh, right, I didn't know that prior. And that's the lesson today. And then you can sort of like maybe move on with it a little bit and be like,
yes, Phil. And I think that's a great point to find that positive part. And I will just say openly, I haven't been able to do it very well. I wasn't good at it as a kid. I've got better, but I'm still not good enough at it as an adult and as a coach. I'm just still very self-critical, and I'm just honest about the fact that I'm not as far along as that, certainly as Ricky, because I listened to him talking about it and how he moves on. I haven't reached that point yet. So I'm driving home, flying past someone, usually saying, what is wrong with these people? They cannot effing drive. What's wrong with them?
I
bet their sons can't play football as well.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things for me was the transition from player to coach. I think is one that people think is just a natural one. It isn't. It is in some regards, right? It is in some regards in terms of your knowledge of the game, your experience of the game. But to go from player to then mentor, role model, coach, it's a completely different realm. But I think when we're making that transition, we bring in all of our competitiveness and our standards as well from when we were a player into the coaching environment. And I think over time, bit by bit, that kind of gets reconfigured a little bit. And I remember when I first started coaching, there was no reconfiguration. Everything as I was as a player, I was as a coach. And so my approach then was very, very different. I think for me, working with girls that actually started to change and started to help me reconfigure how I delivered my message and kind of that whole self-reflection aspect of it, because working with girls was a completely different realm for me. I'd never done it before. And it just kind of set in motion a series of reconfiguration points for me. But listen, we all have those days where we're just like, you know what, this is just a stinker, and I'm in a bad mood, and it's just going to carry on until I get home. Hopefully, it finishes by the time I get out of the car. You know, and again, usually that's with finals or semi-finals. We've had some really, really difficult moments over the years with our club. Especially because it was our club as well. There's that different level of attachment to it because it's effectively it's your product, it's your service. But yeah, it's just a big learning curve, all of it, really. So
yeah,
but great points, boys,
and really great balanced answer. I will just say that's in many of those situations when you haven't let go of it by the time you get home. I've often talked to my dog George about it. So I think that's why he runs away when he gets chance off his lead. That's why he's such a bad dog. Anyway.
He's heard some stuff, hasn't he?
Yeah,
right. That's let's bring that to a wrap. Let's take we've got 2 questions. Paul, the first one's for you. I listened to your episode on player positions. My son is being played midfielder and forward and keeps getting moved around. What advice would you give in this case?
Take it as a positive. Don't look at it in a negative way. I always say, and it's a common saying, a good player can play anywhere. And it's absolutely true. I know that from personal experience. I've played lots of different positions. If you're a good football player and you understand the game, you can play anywhere on the field. And the benefit to playing different positions is obviously you get to see different things and experience different things and have different challenges. So, look, if you're an older player, let's say you're a senior in high school and you're trying to get into college, at which point you need to be looking really at a specific position to say, I'm coming in as a striker or I'm coming in as a winger. Not I want to come in as a utility player and I can play 5 different positions and I'm okay at all of them. So it does depend on the age, but certainly at the younger ages, embrace the fact that you're playing in different positions, enjoy that, take on the challenge from it and learn as much as you can from each position, and don't take it as a negative. Just do what the coach is asking you to do and get the most you can from playing in those different positions.
Great answer. Brilliant. Okay. Question 2 for Phil. My daughter takes free kicks for her team. Do you have any tips for ways to strike the ball and how to strike it from different angles? She is a right-footed player.
Right. Interesting. You just have to go out. You have to go and find a pitch and you need to go and experiment with it. You know, I would suggest if you can get a full-size pitch with a full-size goal and go on, because there's a million different angles, you know, and there's a million different places the wall will be and a million different places the keeper's going to be. Some are going to need you to strike them. Some you're going to have to whip in. Some you're going to have to do a little bit of a mixture of a strikey whip. Sometimes you're going to have to go the goalkeeper's side. Sometimes you're going to have to go over the wall. Sometimes it's again back to emotion. You know, the spotlight's on you. Are you comfortable? Have you taken that breath? Are you? All of a sudden we've turned the game into a bit of a golf shot. You know, everyone's watching you, and you're about to kick a set piece. It's there's a lot that goes into this. Listen, all I could advise is use it as more as a like, the old sayings, like it's a bit of a journey. You have to go out and experiment. You have to go and investigate, what works for you, because we've got so many different really good free kick takers. Like say for instance, Man United rookie, Beckham. Well, obviously we all know him for his free kicks, but they were completely different to Ronaldo's free kicks. Ronaldo would hit that knuckle, and Beckham would hit that like really elegant whip. So it's like with lots of power. And you could probably, and then you get someone like Dennis Irwin, who would old school, would just go and strike one into the top bins with a little bit of curl. Somehow he did that.
For the young kids listening, Phil, now, who would Dennis Irwin be like nowadays? Who would he be like?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? I'd say
a
little bit like a little bit like a good Andy Robertson. I'd say, Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't flashy, was he? He wasn't flashy, but was just steady Eddie.
What about then, Phil, the process prior to a free kick of centering yourself and mentally getting ready for a free kick? Because we all watched Ronaldo. He'd take a certain number of steps back. He'd do that big breath and stand in a certain way. That was his mental preparation and going through a process. Can you say anything about that?
No, I think a process is very, very important. And I'm going to refer back to golf. They say all the top golfers have a specific process before they go and strike their shot, and like we're talking about breath, as you've mentioned, breath, commitment, really committing to something, because sometimes if you commit to something really too much, it can go flying over the bar, and that's embarrassing as well. So there's an element of commitment that you have to do that is condensed into something that's not embarrassing. It's very, very complicated. But anyway, back to process. I like the steps. I like going to the ball and walking back from it. I would suggest having a very, very similar process, or working at your process. And if you get into a good flow and you've come close, you've actually scored a free kick, remember that process and try and replicate it again and go back to that familiarity of it.
So then that takes it on to just a little bit. Let me answer about visualization as well, because I would when I was taking free kicks, as I'm lining up for it, I would have run 4 or 5 times through my mind how I'm hitting it, where it's going to go, and I would actually do that a lot. My imagination would sometimes run wild in a game, and I would do that often in a game. If the left back's got the ball, I'd be running through my mind, what happens if it comes to me? I'm going to chest it down, touch it inside, cut away, and whip it in the far bin. I'd do that visualization all the time.
Brilliant. Yeah. I think a visualization, I'm embarrassed that I didn't mention visualization, but I'm glad you did, because I think it's extremely important, extremely important having that visualization. But also, sorry, can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Ultimately, you got to have technique that you trust, as you're about to go and strike or whip that ball or whatever you want to go do with it.
Strikey whip.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of hybrids going on in there. But as you do that, I think you've got to have maybe 2 or 3 mechanical feelings where you're like, right, if I do this with this part of my body and I do this with this my part, I should be there and thereabouts. And you need to go and work on those couple of feelings for me.
Yeah. Brilliant. On the visualization thing, quickly, just a funny one. We used to coach a player, and he's actually now playing a very good level, a very good level of football. And at that time, Ricky, you'll remember this, he said sometimes while the game's going on, he played the violin. I would hear the violin sounds in my head while the game's going on. And that was maybe his process.
Very beautiful. I can't believe we're only mentioning this now at the end. We could have started with that, Paul. I mean, what does that do for you? What does the violin do for you? What does the violin do for your harmony?
Well, what better way to be in, you mentioned the word flow state. What better way to get into a flow state than Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or whatever it is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, boys, another one finished. Emotions, great episode. Thank you both. And unless you've got anything else to say, we'll wrap it up.
Cheers, Ricky. Great questions. Great hosting.
Well
Cheers,
done, Ricky.
boys. Cheers, Phil.
Cheers, fellas.
That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time.